Welcome to my YouTube channel. Hit the like button, share your thoughts, subscribe and tap the bell icon. The sharp sound of a door slamming echoed through the empty house, making Sarah's heart race. She stood frozen, her hand still gripping the door handle, unsure of what to do next. Tears streamed down her face, but she didn't have the strength to wipe them away. The world outside felt like a foreign place, cold and unforgiving. This was no longer her home. Her legs felt like they might give way at any moment. She had been kicked out. Kicked out of the home she had shared with Harold for over a decade, the home that had once been filled with laughter, love, and promises of a future together. She could still hear his voice, Harold's voice, louder than before, filled with anger. The words stung more than she expected, like daggers aimed straight at her chest. He had been her everything once. The man who promised to love and cherish her until the end of time. But now, he was the one who was throwing her out without a second thought. "You don't belong here anymore." "You never did," he had yelled. The words still rang in her ears. She didn't know how to respond. How did you explain to someone that you had been everything to them just yesterday, and today they wanted you gone? Her breath caught in her throat. She had never seen him like this. Not once in all the years they had been together. Harold was the perfect picture of a billionaire, calm, calculated, and always in control. But today, he was different. There was something wild in his eyes. Something she hadn't noticed before, something dangerous. And then, with a cold smile, he had slammed the door behind her. "Pack your bags. Leave. Now." The door had shut in her face so abruptly that it felt like the final nail in a coffin. The very man who had vowed to protect her, to keep her safe from the storms of life, was the one driving her out. She felt a chill run through her spine, but her feet stayed rooted to the ground. The house around her, once a symbol of security, felt like a prison now. She couldn't understand it. Her mind was clouded with confusion, trying to make sense of the sudden shift in their lives. The life they had built together for so long was crumbling in a matter of minutes. She reached for her phone, desperate to call someone, anyone, but the screen was cracked, and the call wouldn't go through. Her chest tightened with panic. How could she survive this? How could she have ended up in a place like this, thrown out of her own home, alone and afraid? She stumbled backward, her legs giving way beneath her. She hadn't even realized she was walking until she felt the cold cement of the porch beneath her. She had to get out. Had to move before everything fell apart. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. She didn't have to look. She knew who it was. Harold's lawyer. A man who had always been polite, too polite, but never without an agenda. He was never far behind Harold when things got messy. The door opened, and she could hear the shuffle of his polished shoes as he made his way toward the front steps. Sarah didn't look at him. She couldn't bring herself to. The anger, the betrayal, it was all too much. She had been married to Harold for over 10 years. They had everything. A mansion, cars, travel, luxury, and security. What more could anyone want? But now, standing on the front steps of the place she once called home, it all seemed so meaningless. The shiny exterior of their life had been shattered in an instant. The lawyer stepped out of the car, holding an envelope in his hand. He didn't even look at her as he walked toward the house. His face remained expressionless, like he had no connection to the destruction she felt. The door opened, and he disappeared inside. Sarah's heart pounded as she watched him go. What was going on? Why had Harold done this? And why was the lawyer here now? Her mind raced, but her legs felt like they were cemented to the ground. A few minutes passed. The silence was deafening. She heard nothing but the faint sound of the wind rustling through the trees and her own heartbeat in her ears. And then, the phone buzzed in her pocket. She almost didn't want to check it. But she did. Her hands shook as she pulled it out, only to find a new message from Harold. "You're not leaving here with anything. Everything you own is now mine. I've already taken care of it all." Her breath caught. A wave of disbelief washed over her. She couldn't think clearly, couldn't understand how everything had shifted so quickly. Was this a cruel joke? The tears that had once been quiet trickles now poured from her eyes. The reality of it hit her like a ton of bricks. What had happened to Harold? Where had the man she married gone? The man who had once vowed to stand by her side in sickness and health, through thick and thin, now seemed to care nothing for her. Nothing for their shared history, their shared memories. She looked toward the door, hoping to see Harold come out, hoping that he would explain. Anything to make sense of what was happening. But no one came. Her phone buzzed again. This time, the message came from an unknown number. "We know what you've been hiding, Sarah. And we will make sure it never sees the light of day. You've made your bed. Now lie in it." The word sent a shiver through her spine. The message was clear, there was more going on than she realized. And she was in far deeper than she ever thought possible. What was Harold hiding? What did he know that could make him so cruel, so unforgiving? Her knees buckled beneath her, and she fell to the ground, unable to stand anymore. She tried to catch her breath but couldn't. It was like the walls were closing in, the air growing thinner with every second. She pulled herself to her feet, wiping her eyes with trembling hands. Her mind was spinning, a whirlwind of questions and confusion. What had Harold been hiding all this time? What did that message mean? And why had he done this to her? It felt like she had stepped into the middle of a nightmare from which there was no waking up. She wasn't just dealing with a sudden divorce or a bitter argument. She was facing something far more dangerous, far more complicated than she could have ever imagined. The truth was slipping through her fingers faster than she could grasp it. And now, she was terrified that she had no idea what kind of nightmare she had just stepped into. The door creaked open again. She turned, hoping to see Harold, but it wasn't him. It was the lawyer, his face still void of emotion, holding out a small, sealed envelope. He didn't speak a word. He didn't have to. The truth would come out. And when it did, Sarah's world would never be the same. Her heart raced as she reached for the envelope, trying to calm her shaking hands. The air was thick with tension, every second dragging on as if it would never end. Her fingers brushed against the paper, the seal cold against her skin. She hesitated for a moment, unsure if she even wanted to know what was inside. But she opened it anyway. The letter inside was brief, the handwriting crisp and formal. "You are hereby informed that the assets you once shared with Mr. Harold Montgomery are no longer yours. The property, funds, and investments are now controlled solely by Mr. Montgomery. Any attempt to contest this action will be met with immediate legal action. You are advised to leave the premises within 24 hours. Sarah's vision blurred as the words registered in her brain. What did this mean? Her heart pounded in her chest, her breaths coming in shallow gasps. She hadn't just lost her home. She had lost everything. Her entire life, her future, everything she had worked for and dreamed of, gone in an instant. The lawyer turned and walked back toward his car without a word, leaving her standing there, alone, holding the letter that would change her life forever. The house that had once felt so warm and inviting now stood like a monument to everything that had gone wrong. Harold was gone. The life she had known was gone. And with it, any chance she had of reclaiming her past. But the most chilling part was still to come. Harold's final words echoed in her mind, "I've already taken care of it all." What did he mean by that? What had he done? The truth was out there. But Sarah had no idea how deep the hole went. What kind of man had Harold really become? And who was behind this message? Who was watching her, threatening her with a past she couldn't even remember. There was only one way to find out. She had to keep digging. But she wasn't sure if she was ready to face what she would find. Sarah's heart raced as she stood alone on the front steps of the mansion. Her fingers still trembled from the letter she had just read. It felt surreal, like she was caught in a twisted dream she couldn't wake from. She couldn't even remember how long she stood there, her mind numb and racing in all directions. Every inch of the house around her, the very walls that had once felt like safety, now seemed like a looming prison. The lawyer's car had long since disappeared down the winding driveway. The silence was crushing, leaving her with nothing but her own thoughts to fill the void. How had it come to this? How had the life she built with Harold, the man she loved, been ripped apart in a matter of hours? The feeling of betrayal was suffocating. It wasn't just the loss of a home, it was the loss of everything she had known for over a decade. The endless nights of laughter, the quiet mornings spent wrapped in each other's arms, the plans for the future that now felt like distant fantasies. She had never imagined Harold could do something like this. She had always seen him as a man of reason, a man who valued loyalty and honor. Yet here she was, standing on the cold steps of the mansion, with nothing but the shattered remains of her marriage and a mysterious threat hanging over her head. She couldn't just stand there. She had to do something. With a deep breath, she turned away from the house, her legs heavy as she walked down the steps. There was no destination in mind, no clear plan. She didn't even know where to go, who to turn to. She didn't have anyone left. Not after the way Harold had turned on her. Her mind wandered back to the words in the letter, "Any attempt to contest this action will be met with immediate legal action." She couldn't help but wonder, what was Harold really trying to protect? And why had he gone to such lengths to ensure she had nothing left? Her phone buzzed again. Sarah flinched, not wanting to see who it was. But the desperation inside her forced her to glance at the screen. It was an unknown number. "You think you can run away from this, Sarah? You can't. It's too late for that." The text sent a cold chill through her veins. Who were these people? What had she stumbled into? As if on autopilot, Sarah found herself walking toward her car, her eyes scanning the empty streets. The air was thick with an unsettling stillness. She had no clear plan, but the need to escape, to get out of this nightmare, was overwhelming. She started the engine, the sound of the car rumbling to life filling the silence that had settled in her mind. Her hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. She couldn't stay here. Not in that house. Not with all those memories, those cruel reminders of a life that no longer existed. The streets passed by in a blur as she drove aimlessly. The city felt foreign now, as if everything around her had shifted in a way she couldn't quite grasp. Nothing seemed right. Hours passed, and Sarah found herself parked on the side of a quiet street, the car's engine turned off but the headlights still casting a soft glow across the sidewalk. She didn't know where she was, didn't know what she was supposed to do next. The cold reality of her situation settled in like a weight on her chest. She thought of Harold again. The anger in his eyes. The way he had thrown her out of their home without a second thought. What had happened to the man she had married? The man who had promised to love her through everything? How could he just turn off his feelings like that, as if she was nothing more than a burden to him? Sarah's thoughts were interrupted by the sudden ring of her phone. She glanced down at the screen. It was another unknown number. Her stomach twisted. The earlier message still lingered in her mind. She felt a cold sweat break out across her forehead as she answered. "Hello?" Her voice trembled slightly, betraying her calm exterior. The voice on the other end was smooth, almost too calm. It sent a shiver down her spine. "Sarah, you've made a mistake. You're in way over your head," the voice said, each word measured, deliberate. "You don't understand what's at stake here." Her heart skipped a beat. The message sounded like a warning, but the tone was so cold, so detached, that it sent her instincts into overdrive. "Who is this?" she demanded, her pulse quickening. "You don't need to know my name," the voice replied. "What you need to understand is that this isn't just about you and Harold anymore. It never was." Sarah's breath caught. "What do you mean?" There was a pause on the other end. For a moment, she wondered if the person had hung up. But then they spoke again, their voice low and menacing. "Harold isn't the man you think he is. He never was. He's in deeper than you can possibly imagine. And so are you, Sarah. The life you had, the one you thought you built together, wasn't real. It was a lie." The words hit her like a punch to the stomach. Her mind raced. Harold had always been secretive, but this was something else entirely. What did this person mean? What kind of lies were they talking about? How had she not seen the truth all these years? "You need to stay out of this. Go home. Forget what you think you know, and forget Harold. For your own sake, Sarah," the voice continued, its tone growing darker. Her hands shook as she held the phone to her ear. "Why are you doing this? What do you want from me?" The voice didn't answer immediately. Then, almost as an afterthought, they added, "We'll be in touch. And Sarah? Don't try to run." Before she could respond, the line went dead. Sarah stared at her phone, the silence of the call leaving her feeling more isolated than ever. What had just happened? Who was behind this? The buzzing in her head wouldn't stop. She couldn't just ignore this. The warning, the cryptic words, they meant something. But what? And why did it feel like her life had just been turned upside down, like she was caught in a web she couldn't escape from? She drove aimlessly for another hour, her thoughts consumed by the conversation. Whoever these people were, they had a grip on Harold, on both of them, and she had no idea how deep it went. What had she gotten herself involved in? Finally, she pulled into a small, deserted parking lot at the edge of town. The area was quiet, dark, and empty. Sarah stepped out of the car, her legs unsteady, her mind reeling. She didn't know where to go from here. All she had was a sense of urgency, a feeling that something terrible was unfolding around her, and that she wasn't prepared for it. She leaned against the side of her car, trying to steady her breath, when a flash of movement caught her eye. Her body tensed instantly. A figure was walking toward her. Tall, dressed in dark clothing, moving with purpose. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. Was it him? Was it the lawyer? Or worse, someone connected to Harold? She took a step back, her mind racing. There was nowhere to run. Nowhere to hide. The figure drew closer, and Sarah could see the familiar face of a man she never thought she'd see again. It was Richard. Harold's brother. Her breath caught in her throat. Richard had always been a distant figure in her life, distant but not unfriendly. He and Harold had never been close, at least not in any meaningful way. Harold kept his family at arm's length, but Sarah had always believed Richard was harmless. A quiet man who preferred the background. But now, as he walked toward her in the dark, she felt a sudden, chilling sense of dread. "Sarah," Richard's voice was low, almost as if he were trying to keep their conversation private. "You need to listen to me." Her heart pounded in her chest. "Richard, what are you doing here? What's going on? What did Harold do to me?" Richard hesitated, glancing around as if checking to see if anyone was listening. His eyes darted to the shadows before he took a step closer, lowering his voice even further. "I've been trying to warn you. Harold, he's been making dangerous decisions. You have no idea how deep this goes. But you're in more danger now than ever." She took a step back, not sure if she could trust him. "Danger? What do you mean?" Richard's eyes softened for a moment, as if he wanted to say more. But the moment passed, and the stern, guarded look returned. "Just trust me," he said, before turning and walking away, leaving Sarah with more questions than answers. Sarah sat in her car, hands gripping the steering wheel as Richard's cryptic warning echoed in her head. Her heart pounded in her chest, and her mind raced. What had Harold gotten himself into? What kind of danger had she unknowingly walked into? The words Richard had said, "You have no idea how deep this goes. You're in more danger now than ever," stuck in her mind like an insistent drumbeat. She couldn't shake them. Couldn't stop thinking about them. The reality of her situation was dawning on her with terrifying clarity. She was no longer just dealing with a broken marriage. No, this was something far darker, something that stretched far beyond what she had ever imagined. She glanced at the rearview mirror, half expecting to see someone following her, but the road behind was empty. The stillness of the night was unsettling. She felt the weight of her isolation, trapped in a life she no longer understood, with no one to turn to, and no clear path ahead. Her phone buzzed again, pulling her out of her thoughts. This time, it was a text from an unknown number. Her breath caught in her throat. "You're making a big mistake, Sarah. Turn back before it's too late." The hairs on the back of her neck stood up. She wasn't sure who this was, but she had a sinking feeling that this was connected to Harold's actions. Connected to whatever dangerous game he had gotten involved in. But what game was that? And why had he kept her so far removed from it all these years? She dropped her phone onto the passenger seat, too afraid to open the message. Instead, she started the car, its engine hum filling the silence. The next move seemed impossible. Where could she even go? Who could she trust? Richard's warning lingered in the air like a fog that wouldn't lift, clouding her judgment. With no destination in mind, Sarah drove. Her thoughts spiraled further with each passing mile. The world outside her window blurred into a mess of streetlights and shadows. The house, Harold's mansion, felt miles away now, but the weight of it pressed down on her chest as if it were right there with her. How had things gone so wrong? And then there was Harold's brother, Richard. The last person Sarah would have turned to for help had just come out of nowhere, but something in his eyes had made her hesitate. He wasn't lying. Sarah could see it in his face. The fear. The urgency. Why hadn't Harold said anything? Why hadn't he warned her? She wasn't sure if it was hope or foolishness that made her drive toward the one place she thought might give her some answers, the old family estate. Harold had mentioned it once, years ago, in passing. It was an isolated property outside the city, an old house that had been in his family for generations. Harold had told her it was a place of old memories for him, and he hadn't gone back there in years. But something about Richard's words haunted her, and deep down, she felt the pull to go there. If anyone had answers, it would be there. As Sarah neared the outskirts of the city, the streets grew narrower and darker. The glow of the city lights began to fade, replaced by the shadows of trees and unlit roads. A chill ran down her spine. It was as though she were stepping into another world, one where everything she had known and trusted had no place. After what felt like hours, she finally arrived. The old estate loomed ahead, a dark silhouette against the night sky. The gates, once grand and imposing, now stood rusted and forgotten. Sarah drove past them, her headlights illuminating the overgrown path that led to the house. The property was large, surrounded by trees and distant hills. But even in the dark, she could make out the outline of the old mansion, gray stone walls, high windows, and a long, winding driveway. It was eerie in the quiet of the night, the kind of place that felt as if it held secrets buried deep within its walls. Sarah parked the car, her breath shallow. She didn't know what she was looking for. A part of her feared that she was about to step into something far more dangerous than she could handle. But she couldn't stop herself. Her instincts were screaming that the answers she needed were here. She stepped out of the car, the gravel crunching beneath her feet. The air was cold, but it wasn't just the temperature that sent a shiver down her spine. It was the feeling that something was watching her. The house, though silent, seemed to be waiting, as if it knew she was coming. Sarah hesitated at the front door, her hand hovering over the brass doorknob. Her heart hammered in her chest as she tried to calm her racing thoughts. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to turn around, to leave before it was too late. But the part of her that needed answers, the part of her that needed to understand why everything had gone so wrong, would not let her walk away. With a deep breath, she turned the knob and stepped inside. The moment she entered, the air changed. The inside of the house was cold, almost unnervingly so. The faint smell of dust and old wood filled her nostrils, but it wasn't the smell of decay, it was something older, something darker. The walls were lined with old portraits, family heirlooms, and bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes that had long since gathered dust. Sarah's footsteps echoed in the silence as she made her way deeper into the house. It was unnervingly still, as if the place hadn't been touched in years. She felt her breath catch in her throat. This wasn't just a family home, it was a tomb. A tomb full of memories that no one wanted to acknowledge. She reached the main hall, where a grand staircase led up to the second floor. The ornate wooden banisters were chipped and worn, the once bright carpet faded from years of neglect. Sarah's pulse quickened. What was she even looking for? She moved toward the library, a place Harold had mentioned as his safe haven during their marriage. He had spent hours there, buried in books or papers, always lost in thought. Sarah had never been allowed to see what he worked on, but she had always assumed it was business. Now, though, new, unsettling question arose: had Harold's work always been more dangerous than he had let on? The door creaked open as she entered the library, her eyes adjusting to the dim light. The room was massive, filled with shelves of books and papers scattered across a large oak desk. But what caught her attention wasn't the books, it was the chest at the far corner of the room. It was old, made of dark wood, with intricate carvings on its surface. Sarah couldn't explain why, but she was drawn to it. Something about it seemed out of place, as though it didn't belong here, like it had been left in a hurry. Her hands shook as she approached it, her mind racing with 1,000 possibilities. Should she open it? Was this where the answers lay? Every instinct in her screamed to leave, but her curiosity was stronger than her fear. She knelt beside the chest, her fingers brushing the cold metal lock. It was intricately designed, like something from a different time. She fumbled for a moment, unsure if she was about to make a mistake. But then, with a swift motion, she picked the lock. The chest creaked open. Inside, there was a mess of papers, old files, and, Sarah's breath caught in her throat, photographs. She pulled out a stack of photographs, each one showing Harold in different settings, some with people she didn't recognize, others with family members she had never met. But one picture, in particular, made her blood run cold. It was of Harold, standing with a group of men, none of whom she recognized. They were all dressed in dark suits, their expressions cold and unreadable. But what unsettled her the most was Harold. He wasn't the man she had known. His smile was forced, his eyes empty. It was a side of him she had never seen, and it made her feel like she didn't know him at all. She flipped through the photos quickly, her fingers trembling. There were more pictures like this, more images of Harold with people she couldn't place, each one darker than the last. But it wasn't just the pictures that made her uneasy. It was the sense that Harold had been involved in something far beyond her comprehension. Something that had drawn him away from her, something dangerous. At the bottom of the chest, there was a folder. She opened it quickly, her heart racing. Inside was a collection of documents, official-looking papers, contracts, and letters. She scanned the papers, her breath quickening with each page. But the one that caught her attention was a contract, a legal document outlining an agreement she couldn't understand. The words blurred before her eyes as her head swam with disbelief. But one phrase stood out clearly: in the event of unforeseen circumstances, the company's assets will be liquidated, and the remaining shares will be divided among the designated parties, including Harold Montgomery. The room seemed to spin. What had Harold gotten involved in? What company was this? And why hadn't he ever mentioned it? The truth was slipping through her fingers faster than she could grasp it. She had just uncovered a small piece of a much larger puzzle. And as she looked around the dark library, she realized that the answers she sought were closer than ever. But so was the danger. Someone was watching her. And she wasn't sure if she would make it out of the house alive. Sarah stood frozen in the center of the library, the coldness of the house pressing in around her like an invisible weight. She felt her pulse quicken with every breath, her heart thumping loudly in her ears as she held the documents in her trembling hands. The reality of what she was holding seemed too absurd, too sinister to comprehend. Yet, there it was, staring back at her, a truth she hadn't been prepared to face. The contract. The photographs. The letters. Everything pointed to one chilling conclusion: Harold hadn't just kept secrets from her, he had built an entire life she knew nothing about. And she had unwittingly walked straight into the heart of something far darker than she could have imagined. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a door creaking behind her. Her head snapped around, and she saw a figure standing in the doorway of the library. Her breath caught in her throat. Richard. He wasn't supposed to be here. She hadn't told him where she was going. She hadn't planned to come to the estate at all, but something had driven her here. Some strange instinct that had pushed her to seek out the truth, no matter how dangerous it might be. Sarah, Richard's voice was low, but the tension in it was undeniable. His eyes darted toward the papers in her hands, then back to her face. His expression was unreadable, a mask of calm, but Sarah could sense the unease beneath the surface. "Why are you here?" Sarah demanded, her voice shaking slightly as she stood her ground. "What do you know about this?" She held up the papers, the documents she'd found in the chest, the ones that tied Harold to something she couldn't understand. Richard stepped into the room, his eyes narrowing as he glanced at the papers. He didn't seem surprised, but Sarah could see the flicker of concern in his gaze. He moved toward her slowly, as if he were trying to gauge how much she already knew. "It's not what you think," he said quietly, his voice strained. "You don't know everything, Sarah. You're not ready for this." "I'm not ready," she repeated incredulously, the weight of everything she'd learned crashing down on her. "You're standing here telling me I'm not ready for the truth?" "Richard, I have the truth right here." She held the papers up again, the frustration boiling over. "You knew. You knew everything, didn't you? All these years, you've known exactly what Harold's been involved in. And you let me live a lie." Richard ran a hand through his hair, his jaw clenching as if he were struggling to find the right words. "It's complicated, Sarah. Harold." He sighed, looking as though the weight of the world had settled onto his shoulders. "You don't understand what you're dealing with. This isn't just about him. It's about something bigger, something dangerous. And you're too close to it now." She stared at him, trying to make sense of his words. Every part of her wanted to scream, to demand answers, but there was something about Richard's demeanor that made her hesitate. He wasn't trying to protect Harold, he was trying to protect her. "What are you saying?" she whispered, her throat tight with emotion. "What is this? What's going on?" Richard looked at her, his eyes full of regret. "I didn't want this for you, Sarah. I never wanted you to get involved in all of this. But Harold, he's in too deep. He's been caught up in something that goes far beyond anything you can imagine. And now," he shook his head, his voice lowering. "Now, you're in danger too." Sarah felt a cold chill run down her spine. The room seemed to close in around her as she processed Richard's words. "Danger?" she repeated. You're telling me I'm in danger? What do you mean? He took a step closer, his face grim. There are people after him. People who will stop at nothing to get what they want. Harold's involvement in this company, it's not just about money or business. It's about power. And those people? They won't hesitate to use anyone to get what they want. Including you. The truth hit her like a freight train. Everything that had seemed strange, everything that had been left unanswered, was beginning to make sense. Harold's odd behavior. His distance. His secretive late-night meetings. The strange phone calls that she had overheard but never dared to question. It all pointed to something far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. Why didn't you tell me this before? She asked, her voice trembling with anger. Why didn't you warn me? Richard's face softened, regret filling his eyes. I tried, Sarah. I tried to keep you safe. But Harold didn't want anyone to know. He thought if you were kept in the dark, you'd be safe. But it wasn't like that. Not anymore. The moment you came to that house. I came here because I needed to understand. Sarah cut him off, frustration bubbling over. I needed to know the truth. And now I know. Harold has been hiding something terrible from me. But that doesn't explain why you're here, Richard. Why are you involved? Why didn't you just tell me what was going on? Richard's expression turned serious, his eyes narrowing as he spoke again. I wanted to protect you. Harold's world, it's not one you can just walk into. And you didn't deserve to be dragged into it. But now that you're here, there's no turning back. You need to leave, Sarah. It's the only way you'll be safe. A cold wave of fear washed over her. Leave? How could she leave now, knowing what she did? Her mind was racing as the pieces of the puzzle began to fit together. Harold hadn't just kept secrets from her. He had kept her away from the truth for a reason. She had no idea what he was involved in, but whatever it was clear that it had entangled her in something far larger than she could ever have anticipated. And what about you, Richard? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. What happens to you? He shook his head, a small, bitter laugh escaping his lips. I don't know anymore. I can't fix this. I can't fix what Harold has done. But I can try to keep you out of it. That's all I can do now. Sarah's heart sank as she looked at Richard. He was just as trapped as she was. Maybe even more so. They were both caught in the web that Harold had spun, and the more she uncovered, the more tangled she felt in it all. She took a step back, her eyes locking with Richard's. What happens next? She asked, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. You've been trying to protect me, Richard, but I can't keep running. Not from the truth. Richard's face softened, and for a moment, Sarah saw a flicker of something like sadness in his eyes. You don't understand, Sarah. This isn't just about us. There are people who won't stop until they have everything. Harold doesn't even know who he's dealing with. You think he's been in control all this time? He's been a pawn in someone else's game. And now, they're coming for you. A heavy silence fell between them. Sarah's mind raced, trying to make sense of what Richard had just told her. Harold had been a pawn? A pawn in someone else's game? It didn't add up. Harold was always in control. He was always the one calling the shots. How could this have happened without her knowing? The weight of the situation was starting to sink in. There was no running from this anymore. No escaping. Harold's past, his dangerous dealings, the web of lies, the secrets, had come crashing down on her. She took another step back, her gaze flickering to the door. The night was still, but the danger was growing, closing in on her. There was only one way out of this, one way to end it all. I need to find Harold, she said, her voice firm. I need to find him and make him tell me the truth. I won't be left in the dark any longer. Richard stepped forward, grabbing her arm. Sarah, don't. But it was too late. She pulled away, her mind made up. She didn't care about the danger. She didn't care about the consequences. She needed answers. She needed to know why everything had gone so wrong. And she would do whatever it took to get them.